Hi everyone, Brinley here for your next installment of 100 in 100. And as the name suggests, as the title of this session, we've got to the business end of the appraisal process. So as we discussed previously, the appraisal process is the most important part of the development life cycle. And as we go through the layers, adding more detail, more analysis to ensure that we're moving forward with the right deals, we come to the business end of the appraisal process being a full development appraisal. Now, I want to stress here that this is pre-securing the deal. So this is the kind of level of detail that we suggest that you should go to before securing a deal. As we've previously gone through in terms of high-level numbers and discussing high-level numbers with the owners and doing it in stages, that's fine to get a gauge of expectation and just get the green light to keep moving and keep spending your resources on working out what a viable deal is for you. But we wouldn't really be moving forward. We wouldn't advise moving forward on any types of offers until you've done this level of due diligence. So the full development appraisal, and we're going to spend a session on each of the 9 pillars of the full development appraisal process in coming sessions. But it's made up of 9 areas. We call them the 9 pillars, and they are demand, scheme design, planning, legals, construction, funding, costs, deal structure, and exit. Now, previously on some of the other areas of the appraisal process, we may have looked into some of these areas already, things like costs. During costs, we're obviously assessing, everything from GDV, the high level numbers, professional fees, build costs, funding, all that kind of stuff. But before we move forward, we want to look into each area in a lot more detail. Generally, we're starting with the end in mind. You may have the end in mind when it comes to looking at the different deals that you're looking at anyway in terms of exit, but we want to examine things like the exit at this stage to ensure that we put the right deal structures in place that will get us the result that we want to get, essentially. And up to now, if you've been negotiating and keeping in good constant communication with the landowners, it's important to stress that we need to go to this level of detail to ensure that we put the right deal structures in place for them as well, because it's not necessarily about how much you offer them at the top level, it's how much that they end up with on the bottom line. So there are instances and deal structures that may or may not be suitable depending on what their outcome, what outcome they want to achieve. So at this stage, we'll be taking on board all the information that we've gathered up to now, and then we'll be making some decisions in these 9 key areas on how we are going to proceed. But by which point we've got to this point, right? So we spent a fair amount of time and a fair amount of resource on getting the opportunity to this point. So we've got a pretty good idea and understanding that what we're looking at is a viable deal. So it's not necessarily working out whether it's a deal or not, it's how we can move forward in the best way possible. So we're going to go through each of these 9 areas in subsequent sessions, but wanted to use today's 100 in 100 to give you more context in and around what a full development appraisal is and the real importance of doing them pre-offer. We often see developers make mistakes where they try and secure the deal as quickly as possible, get everything secured, get legals instructed, exchange and complete on the deal, and then start doing further due diligence on things like demand, for example. So they might have done high level numbers on a block of apartments, but they haven't necessarily looked into whether those apartments are in demand. So we look at different metrics at this stage to assess what's in demand, which will have a knock-on effect in terms of what schemes we put through. So in an appraisal, at this appraisal stage, we're probably going to be looking at multiple scheme designs. We've obviously looked a fair amount into the planning at this stage, but we're more focused on planning strategy and what we've got to do and what we've got to put in place and the costs associated with that to get the result that we want to get. Prior to purchase, we may need expert advice from a legal team in terms of title reviews and things like that. We're potentially looking at more of an in-depth procurement method for the construction, whether we're the main contractor, whether we're going to buy in the main contractor, what construction methods are we going to use. When it comes to funding, what funding requirements do we need? How much equity have we got ourselves? What investor requirements do we need? We'd probably be reaching out at this stage to see if we can get some offers in principle from development funders, just to help with the process. That can often help with negotiation as well, to sort of suggest that we've already got funding lined up for these deals. We're obviously looking a lot more into the costs at this stage, and basically we're trying to ascertain where the risks are with regards to costs, because we want to try and mitigate those in the deal structure. Deal structures, so we'll be looking at subject to offers mainly for ourselves. Very rarely do we do non-conditional or unconditional rather deals from that regard, but we would be putting some form of conditions in place based on planning or based on things like developer contributions that may come in during the period. As I said, we're going to go into detail in a lot more detail of these areas as we go through the next 9 days essentially. So this session's been more of an introduction into the full development appraisal process. If you're at this stage, you're looking to try and do as much of this as you can, but this is where you can start spending a hell of a lot of time and a lot of resource reaching out to third-party specialists with regards to finding information. As I said, legal reviews, for example, you might be getting a better idea on costs, so you might be getting somebody like a QS involved at this stage. You might be talking to your overall development consultant if you've got one, somebody like Richard or myself, for example. So this is where you start mounting the costs, and the stages of the appraisal before now are designed so we're not taking every single deal that reaches our desk to this level of detail and due diligence. At this point, we've got a pretty good idea whether we're going to move forward or not. So hopefully you found this introduction useful, and stay tuned for tomorrow's session where we'll be looking at demand. Take care.